Welcome everybody to the Smooth Brain Society. I'm Sahir again, and today, if you guys can remember, few listeners might. 2 years ago, for World Refugee Day, we recorded with Marike Jasperse and Kodrean Eashae about a little bit about New Zealand's policies around refugees. And today, Kodrean was very gracious to come back on again with Luis Perez. They both are part of an organization called Voice of Aroha. Kodrean did mention it before, but I'll kind of talk you through it again. So, Kodrean Eashae is the CEO and founder of Voice of Aroha, and Luis Perez is the chair. So, Voice of Aroha is an inclusive platform amplifying the voices of a variety of communities and their perspectives on many topics. Um, their team comes from a diverse background of former refugees who are based in Wellington, and their kind of platform brings about meaningful korero. So korero for people who are not from New Zealand means kind of discussion. So they bring to light the wider community through a range of discussions, programs, interviews. They have a podcast, they have a YouTube channel, and they host many events focusing on amplifying voices of marginalized communities. They aim to bring communities together while creating a safe space where former refugees can share their perspectives and take control of the narratives that concern them and contribute to a more progressive New Zealand. With us, I always have a co host. Today, our co host is Thoraya Abdul-Rassol. She is an enrolled barrister and solicitor at the High Court of New Zealand. Her LinkedIn says she's passionate about using her analytical skills to help communities. Um, but one incredible thing she does is she hosts a podcast called Me, Racism, and I, where she along with her co-host Julian have the more uncomfortable conversations around racism in hopes of making the world a more understanding place. So welcome all of you guys to the podcast.
Kia ora.
And it's just how great everyone is podcaster today. Hey.
I wish I edited my LinkedIn bio.
To be fair, if Thoraya had not edited her LinkedIn bio, I would have what do you say? I would have just brought back stories from our past because she was also my RA when I was a student. So I would have pulled
maybe
up
it's good you
stats
went for
from then.
LinkedIn then.
All right, but because Voice of Aroha is all about highlighting the stories, that's why I didn't talk a lot about anyone's backgrounds. I thought you guys could introduce yourselves in more detail. I just thought I'd give more of a background of Voice of Aroha and then let you guys speak to it. So I don't know which order we want to go in, because I guess because Kodrean was here last time as well, he can start off first because I feel his would be the shortest, and then Lewis and Thoraya can talk about their backgrounds a bit.
Okay, great. So it's just basically you're telling me we heard your story 2 years ago. Just tell us in 2 sentences, right? But hey, look, it's really great and glad to be again on your podcast. It's been a pleasure to be invited last time and this time as well. Thank you for everything you do. So you bring a lot of interesting corridors around there with a different perspective and people and professors and doctors there. So kia ora to Mahi there. And again, it's to the listeners, it's me, Kodrean Eashae. I'm originally come from land called Iraq for now. It is Assyria, there's Mesopotamia, there's kind of, you can call me, go back to indigenous people of Middle East or Assyrian people. So that's where my whakapapa go back and where it's come from. And so there's a lot of history out there. But my story have to New Zealand. I've been reunited with my family in 2018. Is that cut again?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let someone else introduce themselves. I will just fix this internet. Sorry, Sahar. I will fix this.
Sounds good. Lewis, you can go ahead then.
Yeah, cool. I can go. So kia ora whanau, ko Colombia te whakapapa rani mai, ko Ecuador te whenua tapu, ko te whanganui tara aho, ko te awa karangi o e noho ana. So my name is Luis. I descend from Colombia for two indigenous tribes. I grew up in Ecuador, and I currently live in Wellington. Exactly, I live in the Hutt, in Lower Hutt. So that's my introduction in Te Ao Māori. I'm a strong believer of indigenous rights in indigenous communities. So that's why I'm learning Te Reo Māori, and I'm in my Reo journey as well. So namihi nui to everyone that is listening to us. My story goes like everyone else's. Been relocated to Wellington 10 years ago with my family, and I've been here ever since. Done my studies, now done a lot of work. I have moved around the country here and there, and now we're part of Voice of Aroha with Kodrean, and just doing a lot of work in that community. So that's essentially my introduction.
Kia ora, my name's Thoraya. I'm originally from Iraq, and I immigrated to New Zealand back in 95 with my parents when I was 1. We immigrated because we were fleeing Saddam's regime. So we got to Auckland in 95 and stayed put, didn't go anywhere else. I, in my teenage years, lived in Wellington, and then I moved to Hamilton, which is where I have stayed put happily, now not happily at the start. I guess like something that I'm going to assume that we all can kind of relate to, being immigrants and refugees in another country, is we probably have experienced some form of racism. For myself, it's something that I have been dealing with since I was in daycare, which was from the age of like 2. And I've kind of made it / been thrust into it being my life's work. I remember saying throughout high school that I think like the whole reason why I'm here is to create discussion and break down barriers between specifically the West and Islam, or the West and the Middle East. But I think largely it's between an us and them mentality. I think it's quite generous, or it gives me a lot of credit to say that this is why I've been put on this earth, or this is my purpose. I think the reality is I have suffered and dealt with racism so much that I kind of had no choice but to deal with it. I tend to be a screw the system, fight the man mentality. And as part of that, I have finally launched a podcast with my friend Julian called Me, Racism, and I. And the idea behind that podcast is to have the uncomfortable conversation about racism in the hopes of making the world a more understanding place. And the reason why I say they're uncomfortable conversations isn't because I think they should be uncomfortable. I think just the reality of talking about something like racism invokes so much emotion, and people get defensive straight away, that it just turns out to be quite uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean that the discussions shouldn't be had. So I decided to do a podcast with a close friend of mine where we can have those conversations and just be really honest with each other and kind of push each other's limits on our thoughts in a safe environment. Because the last thing that I would want is to have a random person interview me and come from a different perspective and myself feel attacked. So it was really important for me to do it with a friend who I've already got that relationship with. So it's more of a safe space.
Very good. That's nice. So, both the Voice of Aurora and Me Racism and I will be linked in all the show notes and everything for people, so for everybody to check out. But Kodrean's back. Kodrean, do you want to try for a third time?
Yes, let's see. I will make it very short. Hey, kia ora, guys, and goodbye. I'm just joking. Okay. Let me try and say, because the government is talking about saving the power and it's electricity, so that's why my internet's impacting maybe this day. But, let's see. So, kia ora, guys. My name is Kodrean Eashae. I'm just glad again be back on this beautiful podcast. And originally about my story, where I come from. I originally come from a place called Mesopotamia or Middle East or Iraq. And I'm from Assyrian community where we are the indigenous people of the land and the neighbors around Iraq, which is now is Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria. We have a part of each of those countries. History there, but I've been come as a reunification process of refugee to New Zealand since 2018, and I've been settling here in Wellington. And just last week, I got my citizenship. So that's my short story here.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. Nice to meet you, Thoraya. Whereas also we share Whakapapa to Iraq, and it's just lovely
Yes, we do.
to meet you. And also the other things is a cool stuff. We're talking about Voice of Aroha, which I have amazing friend here, Luis, and he's indigenous people to Amazon, right, Luis? And it's just a cool how all that where we come from, Middle East, Latin America, and Europe, and everywhere. Then we meet in this little island, which is Aotearoa, that we can find ourselves, we can find our history pathways together that align the stories of the indigenous people, the stories that bring us in this land, and the stories that we are creating on those lands. That's what is important after this. That's where I think the VOA can link to why is important the things we are doing, why is important to amplifying those voices, why is important to bring the diversity of different people that maybe they don't have a chance to speak up in a bigger media platform. So that's where we come from here. And that experience started when I faced this kind of challenge, or I could put it, whatever you can put it in words about, maybe could be also discrimination, different type of discrimination that I was then looked undermined into my first journey when I started here, that who's coming from Iraq, which is I can't take that name from my CV or from my identity, and then I was being judged by that. So I need to stay a lot of years to improve who I am, improve my skills. And I found really challenge in the sector that I love, that I have skills, that I have things to contribute, to find a meaningful opportunity. That was all started like as employment. And a lot of things that come out, they find out is not just me. There's many others who are from different communities, who are struggling from different things. They do not have a proper voice or a channel or somewhere to tell their stories. So that could be one of the reasons that we come up with this idea about Voice of Aroha. And there's a lot I can share with you, Sahar and team, about why and what we are doing and how it started. So, but I will bring Mike back to you for any other questions.
Well, considering the next question was going to be what you guys are doing, how it started, you're the CEO, so I'm assuming you, and the founder, so I'm assuming you started it, but it'll be interesting to know, Lewis, how you got involved as well with Voice of Aroha and what you're doing with them.
It's essentially just to amplify what Kodrean was trying to say and his korero. Voice of Aroha started because, in Wellington, we didn't have a platform to amplify our voices. We didn't have a platform where you could be the CEO, the manager, the owner of your own story. As simple as it's my story, and it should be told under my conditions. It should be told in the way that I want the story to be portrayed. And when we were looking into what the traditional media was trying to do and Aotearoa and overseas, well, it's either dehumanizing or victimizing people. So we were we kind of don't share the same mahi that they're doing. So we need to, we need a different platform. I joined VOA because of those reasons, and I actually joined VOA when I saw them launching their first podcast. when I saw that online, and I was like, I want to be part of that Kopapa. Kopapa is like, the work they were trying to put together. First episode that was out there, I listened to that one, and I was like, I want to be part of it. And now we've been like 5 years. We're going to be 5 years since that. So it's critical for us like to actually get together, because when you get together, you can create this sort of work by yourself. You can go far, but it's a saying that's like go alone and you go there, but go together and you go further. So that's the main purpose here. VOA is strong because we came together, different communities. It's Kodrean Eashae. I'm from Latin America. He's from the Middle East. We go other communities from Africa and from other parts of the world, even from Aotearoa. So it's critical, and it's the magic. When you get together, that's what happens. So that's essentially how I joined VOA, and Kodrean may have the more technical details, but that's kind of like my core.
Kia ora to you, Louise. And this is, you can see that also through this, not only Voice of Aroha provider platform, but we also created this relationship, which is, this is a 5 years or maybe more. I know Louise, maybe more than that. We don't have before, but now become like a kind of weekly. We do a lot of corridors together, and stories and the people we met in the way is just a great how have been growing. So to answer you, Sahir, about how it created and why it created, I think, like I said, the why. There was a why that started with my story, but when I was also looking on the other people's stories, and then when I just found out the opportunity that Access Radio wanted to put a radio program for refugees. At that time, I said, I want to do it. And I had no idea about what journalism look, how the podcasting work, what is. The first time, actually, I was also like, was not so confident on speaking too much in a microphone. That was my first experience. But you know what triggered me, like me, when I first had opportunity to talk to Jesse Mulligan. He had a program. I think he was doing it weekly or monthly. He was bringing a refugee background person in his show. So I had that 10-minute slots with Jesse Mulligan in RNZ. And the next day I was just walking, find out people say, oh, we heard your story, it was cool, this kind of stuff. I said, well, who is this? And I don't know them, but they heard the name, they heard the story there. And I've been impressed because they say, wow, there's a way we can reach to people. There's a way that when we tell our stories, and so he had the set up of questions. So there's channels that we can tell our stories and the things we are facing by our opportunities. So then I heard about Access Radio. I said, I will take it. At that time, I had it. Also was losing my job at that NGOs. They were, when they run out from the funding, it was my contract 3 months and it finished. And I said, what I will do? So I started something to do voluntarily. I said, great, I will do this show. And I attended another amazing workshop. It was called Link. Learn and innovate with the new Kiwis with my other. Now it's a great friend after I met her with that workshop. So in that workshop, I really enjoyed about what's happened on the designing of solution for resettlement. Then I met 2 other wonderful ladies, Nargis and Beth, who were our our previous board members and our previous volunteers who joined the platforms. So I checked them, hey, there's something like this. Do you want to do it? They said, oh, yes, let's see. And so they were like a shy. First time someone approaching them, hey, invited you to come to my team. Who you are, Kodrean, to come. So it was like that how it's really started. I never met them. I just met them there. And then next day, I met other friends. She connected me with someone else in the university. Then, which is Juan. He's now in Colombia back, but he still do the editing now. Then I met Juan, and then another friend. She didn't join us. She was very busy. So I created like a 4 or 5. Then I had someone whose name is Hamid, which is our production lead now. He's an amazing person. His story have also created part of the why he increased my passion. I have to create this happen because I was struggling to find meaningful job for him. The reason for that, I was working in an organization. We were I was community talent manager. We were trying to reduce barriers for refugee background who have the skills to have a meaningful job. That was my rule, to interview the people. So one of them is my friend Hamid, who interviewed. I found his skills of a music, 20 years experience, sound engineer. It was really hard to tell the market, hey, there's the skills here, just give them opportunity, try. So this kind of stuff, I found there is something need to be changed. Then I looked around me, all the other organization providers. The narrative it was told about refugee is a wrong one. Always you see the trauma, always you see the sad side. Sad side. So despite this, they never show, they was limited to show you a successful story, a positive things that what refugee background people are contributing, what they are doing, what is their kind of the stories need to hear, how they are contributing to community. This side was really not there. When they change the narrative, then what they know, the people, it's impacting us. You may tell the story on my history of sadness, etc. You will get your funding, you get your empathy of people, but you are impacting me for a long term and you don't realize that. But we realize that because I come with a person who speaks 4 languages, who have all the certificate things that is all okay, ticks all the boxes. I find it very hard to find a job. It's just simply a job. So that is that story, how it started from there, and breaking all these amazing people and find out there's people who grew up in this country because of their name or because of their background, they've been discriminated and racism against them. They couldn't get into specific jobs, or they've been treated differently into some spaces. That's how we combined those voices together. We come back to the station and we created this called like a Voice of Aroha. And the first one we talked about, we say, let's just talk about our stories. Let's tell our stories, who you are. And that's how we told it in a way that each one to be free to tell what's your background, where you come from, what you love, where you're going for. And there's many other podcasts. You can listen to our seasons 1 and 2. We really disagree with each other. But at the end of the day, in respectful manner, we talked on that table. We put our views. I still review that some of them. So, should I remove it? What I was saying here, but it's not. Leave it there because I really changed my mind from 2-3 years ago about specific topics there. So that's how really it started, and it's grown from there to become a more like we can talk more like become now what we're faced, we are storytelling into awareness program making into community organization, holding events, and etc. So that's a little bit short history for you and the listeners, how we started.
Very nice. So the shit stirring side of me wants to ask, what were the things you guys were disagreeing on in the first few seasons? I get the idea of I
I
get
can
the
tell
idea
you.
that sometimes refugees I get the idea that sometimes refugees in general are just taken across as one group, but that's not true at all, right? There's so many different tiny aspects which differ from refugee to refugee, even if they're coming from, say, the same place. Um, but um, I, but also in the way I guess the host countries kind of treat different groups of migrants coming from different countries as well. I feel there's a big difference between that as well. But yeah, you guys can obviously talk more about it through the lived experience of it. Kodrean, yeah, you wanted to say something about the disagreements you had to begin with?
Yeah, just the one story, and it was about race relation day. There was a topic we were talking about in a podcast. What is the race and who is the race? And so my friend was saying we are a different race, and I was arguing that we are one race. And what do you guys think? If I just test your ideas, just tell me, are we a different race or one race?
What, like, was your friend Assyrian?
Sorry?
Was your friend that you were speaking to Assyrian?
No, she was Iraqi and the other one Ethiopian.
Okay. I would say no.
Okay. Sahar?
Ooh, I I would say yes, we are one race, but that's because I'd say I'm a very genetics person, and I think there is no. I that's what I do neuroscience wise, right? And I would say that in that case we're all the human race. We are one race.
Okay, cool.
But then but then I guess when you go into different things, I feel you can get into the nitty gritty of it in terms of when you go into like legal definitions and so on and so forth and how
I
people
was just
behave.
going to say, you'd have to define what race actually is, because if we're coming at it from different definitions, we're going to have different answers, but that's an annoying answer in itself.
Luis, what do you think? You see, this has already now become a topic for you.
We already had this conversation before, and yeah, I guess like what you were saying before was right. Like if you're coming from the legal angle, then you probably say like, well, it's a different answer. But if you come from a community lens, then yes, we're just one race.
Yeah. So basically, so this was the conversation about are we one, are we more, and how? Because that time, you know why I was really very I listened to that podcast again. So much defending on it, but I still like a belief on my definitions about why I call it one race and a human race. So the reason of this story we've been talking, and I was pushing for that one race because I really attended a Hui. I saw a booklet. In that booklet, they put like the people with different colors that they think we are different race and we are here to make a relationship with different races. The moment when you capture that book, when you pick it, of course, the kids who just grew up in this world, they will see that differences that you are trying to sell that differences to them. That was my idea because that's what happened. I was kind of didn't know much about race relation. All of these days are many. There's a lot of days in Aotearoa are new to me. So when I saw that booklet, I say the cover of this booklet, there's something wrong here. If I had no idea about this topic, just because of the selling me this cover, you're trying to telling me and look at my friend and look at him. If we are different colors, then we are different races and etc. And then later on, I've been having friends from all different countries and stuff. I find what is the difference between me and the black and the white and etc. There's a different experience. There's a different privilege and etc. and stuff like that. But I did not find as a human that this person he don't have eyes, he don't have a nose and etc. I just found I don't know why if we are, and I'm a believer of as well. I say we are all come from one source, as a human source, as a human race. So that was kind of my understanding about this. And that's how I think my argument was let's try to teach that if we are one human race, the kids will grow up to see that ideology as a one human race. And it could be opportunity we reduce the racism, reduce the things we are creating, which is society, people are creating to divide us between here and there and that. So that was kind of the arguments. We were having a hot conversations there. But again, I thought to my friends who shared a beautiful corridor on that podcast. They really had their points, they had their arguments, and it was just a cool conversation. This is one of many other conversations. We talked about climate, but actually that time we talked about climate from indigenous perspective, how we can talk about it and etc. So there was a lot of other topics. I will stop here for now.
There's points that I want to make, but I'm just conscious of the time. Kodrean, do you need to leave?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. So, here's what we do, guys.
All right, what we can do is
I
Kodrean.
will just 3 more minutes for
Give,
you.
I'll
Oh my
I'll
god.
I'll give Kodrean the yeah I'll give Kodrean the mic again for a couple minutes. What we couldn't even cover the climate stuff, which we wanted to with you. Is there anything important you'd like to say before you leave? Any key things which you'd like to get across to our listeners? And we'll let you go, and we can talk with Lewis in a bit more detail after that.
Yes. So Luis, he's the boss. He know all of these amazing journey of the 5 years. So go ahead with him. Specifically climate. He's the man of the climate, and go ahead with all of that. So let me just quickly say three things, or just a normal message in 3 minutes. Firstly, thank you so much. Lovely to meet you, Thoraya, and be with you again, Sahir. And I really love um, this podcast. I've been listening to some of the cool people time to time when I see them on Instagram. Keep doing those reels are good. What I want to say, Sahar, through this corridor, and you're having, there's a lot we can talk about Voice of Aroha. We may touch base a little bit his history about who we are and what we do. There's other programs we do, and Luis will be touch base on talk more on them. And what I want really say, it's a World Refugee Day on 20 June. If this podcast going out that time, let's celebrate our people not in just one day. Let's celebrate them every day. Let's celebrate them every week, and let's give them the opportunity that we want for ourselves. And as well, let's also say that refugee background or a refugee identity, they call it, some people, is not a choosing identity, it's a forced identity, that many people do not want to go through this kind of scenario. We never really have understood what is it. But the challenges, I always say, is great opportunity, but let's remind ourselves that me and you, we could be one day a refugee to our neighboring countries and stuff. So the key here is to be kind. No matter what, to be kind. That's the one we need to be, no matter where their backgrounds has come with, to treat them in dignity and humanity, that to open our doors and hearts and to listen. The listening is the only key. Could be someone can give it for free. That's what you want to do, and that's I encourage anyone listening to this that to think about this. You might think kindness in this world is going well. Actually, whatever is going in this world is going crazy mad. But we always have a hope. We always have a kind. If also me and you decide to turn that one to be eagle, like some people right now are doing and genociding many other places, what's happening in Palestine. Imagine what hope we will have. So I think I encourage just to listen to this word. Please leave the judgments out there. Let's create a hope. Let's create a kindness. Let's create things that's impossible possible. And let's bring the peace that the world is taking from us, that me and you, we can build it. We can build it through our ways, through the podcast, through the understanding, through that at least a corridor. Invite your friend, invite your neighbor tomorrow. Let's have a coffee and talk about something that, okay, we are different, but we can share, see how we can live together, how we can do things together. So I think there's always a way when there's a hope, when there's a desire to make peace, desire to make things beautiful. And that will be my message here, Sahir. I know this is a wonderful conversations about Rich talking about exactly what we do and stuff. But one thing we do is amplifying the voices. And thank you for allowing me this chance to share a little bit corridor here with you and the beautiful hostess and my colleague as well here, Luis. So I leave you in peace and thank you again for the opportunity.
Of course, thank you, Kodrean. You're always welcome back. Hopefully with better internet.
Kodrean is
Right. So
chasing
yeah.
the southern lights.
Yeah.
I
Take
need,
care, Kodrean.
I need to chase it. Thank you so much. I really have, honestly, I had a long day, but I need to finish things. Thank you, guys. Please enjoy and do it. Goodbye from me.
Well, that poor Kodrean, with the internet and all that, and having to leave. But all right, I've got a good question for you, Lewis, because Kodrean was a lot older when he moved over here. Well, Thoraya, you said you came here as a migrant when you were 1. Lewis, you mentioned that you've been here for 20 years. So you guys came over a lot younger. What was it like growing up in Aotearoa, uh, having that refugee tag to an extent as well? Yeah, if you could share some of your experiences growing up. And
Yeah, cool. I think I can go first. I haven't been here for 20 years. It's been 10. So I technically grew up in Ecuador. That's where I spent like 10 years of my life. So I came here when I was 19. already grown up, ready to start university. But I mean, like that's the system that you have to face when you are someone that is ready to go to university or to go to work, and what do you do? So the system does not allow you to just go back to school and retrain to the mainstream school. So that's and honestly, like speaking until today, in the system that we have, like for people like myself that I see, then there's the struggle because there's no much structure around. And when you are around the school system, then there's support, there's a lot of things that can help you out to succeed and whatever terms you define success. For someone like myself, like most like young people, like young in the term that 19 plus, that is a different story, and that's when the struggles starts, because you either are on the benefit or you either make yourself to go to university or to find a good job, and then how do you do that? And that's what I face when I go to Aotearoa. But it's also a lot of support like Aotearoa, and I know that around the world there's a lot of people that are willing to support you. And I was very lucky and fortunate to have the support around the university that I went to, part of different networks, and trying to tap into different systems. That is what I faced when I got here. So that's what I could share.
What's the question?
Oh, like life experiences of growing up in New Zealand. I didn't grow up in New Zealand. I came, like Lewis said, I came to New Zealand when I was 18 as well. So
Weren't you like 5 in New Zealand?
yeah, well, I don't remember that much. I remember being made fun of in India for my accent being weird.
So were you born in New
I
Zealand?
I was born in New Zealand. I spoke Urdu with a weird English accent when I first showed up in India. So people
And when
made
did you
fun
go
of me
back
for
to
having
India?
two strange accents. Age of 6.
Okay.
Yeah. We spent some time in the States, but we don't count that.
How long?
That was 9/11 times. It was like 2001 for a bit. It's not the best time to be a Muslim
Yeah.
family.
No, the timing didn't work out for you there, did it?
Not really. No. But yeah, I guess I've been to the States back and forth and things. But yeah, the question was more for you because you're the only one of us who's grown up in Aotearoa now.
Yeah, growing up in New Zealand, I always knew that I was different. I knew I wasn't Kiwi. It kind of got shoved in my face a bit, but it wasn't necessarily a bad thing because, like, I had my identity strong in that I wasn't a Kiwi, or like I'm Iraqi, and at home we spoke Arabic. Like, it was very much like you are Iraqi. Our community socially was Iraqi as well. The only times that it really bothered me was when people would get my identity wrong. So again, like, I'm just going to be harping on about racism and like my experiences with it. But like growing up, getting called Indian nonstop really bugged me. And it's not because I took offense to being called Indian. It was because I took offense that people weren't getting my identity correct and didn't care enough to check. Yeah, I think that's like one of the biggest frustrations, is that you are an other, but you're not important enough to correctly identify that other. Is what really frustrated me. I'm really curious, Lewis, when you well, one of the things that Kodrean mentioned before he had to go was about how the refugee title or refugee label is kind of thrust upon you, and it's something that you don't have a choice in. It's sticking with you almost. So I am an immigrant, I'm not a refugee, and I have felt like that title has kind of been thrust upon me. I'm curious to see or to understand how the refugee title has being thrust upon you and circumstances where it's stating you can't shed it. So if I talk about some examples, like university is probably the most obvious example. So I'm a citizen. I've been a New Zealand citizen since I was 5 years old. I never really knew what citizenship was because I got it so young. And it was only when I got into university and understood that there was like a cost difference between international students and domestic students did I really kind of understand why that title might make a difference. Certainly in a university sense when they want more money. But one of the things that kept happening, and as Saha joked when we first started the podcast episode, is I have been to 3 universities out of the 6 maybe in New Zealand, and at every single university I have gone to, I've been obviously a domestic student, and I have ticked domestic student. Yet, despite that, I have been placed on the international students list for every single university. There's nothing wrong, obviously, with being an international student, but back to my point of people getting my ethnicity or my race wrong growing up, I took offense to it because it was like, I've literally filled out the paperwork to say I'm domestic. You would have had to see like my passport or my citizenship or whatever to verify it. Yet despite that, I'm still getting put in these international students mailing list or whatever it might be, like getting lumped with the international students. And what was frustrating was like, even then, like, you don't care enough to put me in the right group. Just because my name is ethnic doesn't mean that I'm not a citizen. So I'm curious to see, like, as a refugee, are there circumstances like that you're faced with? Is it very frequent?
That's a really good question because I'm one of the advocates to take the label away, and I would not allow anyone to put that on anyone. So I work in the youth space. One of the things that we had a conversation last year, and that was for the Ministry of Youth, Ministry of Youth, and they were trying to develop a new strategy. And one of the things that came out of there, especially from young people, said like, hey, if you want us to come to the table and to have the coordinator to have the conversation, take the label away from us. If you want us to do some projects to work for us, take away the label because we do not identify with that. And that clearly speaks to myself because I'm more than a label. I want people to recognize me for my skills, and we all talk about climate change because I'm really passionate about it because I want everyone to start, caring about the environment and whatnot. But just going back to the label, even at university, when I was there, when I went to a big uni, when I was there, they didn't have any support for us because we were on the other side of the fence, like in UK. We were not either domestic or internationals. We were just in limbo. And I said to them, where's the support for the community? And so we had to set up our own structures when we were there. And we set up this student club called Big Without Barriers. And the reason why we call it Big Without Barriers is because there shouldn't be barriers for the students to come to university, to learn, and to get ahead in life. We didn't put the label in the name, and it was very clear from the students, like, do not call us like that. This is how we are, and this is how we want to portray ourselves. Voice of Aroha is a clear example of, like, every co-papa that I'm part of, I do not allow them to put the label there, just because we have identities and we should be able to represent ourselves. As soon as I left university, they set up a refugee advisor, and I, until today, I'm like, you should not put that label there. You should actually consult with the students and say, how do you want to call it? How do you want to be represented? So it's clearly a label that really bothers me. And it bothers me because it has a lot of negative connotations. It bothers me because people have been dehumanizing them. because of your culture, because of where you come from, and those stigmas actually get you. And things that happened for me like 20 years ago when I was a little one, I just don't relate to it. I'm like, hey, I've been here. I'm working in the climate space. I want to talk about climate solutions. And that's kind of like the identity that I'm trying to push, the narrative that I'm trying to get across. And as I said at the beginning, everyone has a voice. Everyone should be able to represent themselves. We should be, it's time for organizations that work in the resettlement space. It's time for the organizations overseas that work in the refugee space to actually say, hey, it's time to change the narrative. It's time to actually be building something else. And I understand it clearly when it comes to, funders and donors and reporting and sending to the governments like, we're serving this category. But that's fine in that regard. But if you are representing them in the front line, you should be representing them as community members. That way that I represent is like, hey, I'm here doing my mahi, representing community members. Other organizations may call them clients. I call them community members because they are community members in my view.
That's very well put. I get the issue of like I feel it is a bit of an issue of a term which should probably just be left for like a politics funding kind of thing, that this is going to this community and you title it refugees, getting the kind of that kind of tag, just staying for that one purpose in sort of a hall somewhere, being like leaked out to like the general public and the connotations around it and it being labeled to you to an example. It's uh yeah, it feels a bit like that, where there might be, for example, like you said, for funding, where it might be useful to have something on that line, if not that exact term, but something on this line. But for everything else, it becomes a negative very quickly. Especially because what Kodrean said, that anybody could be a refugee at any time. Like, you do not really have control over it. Like, we could have earthquakes in Aotearoa, and then all of a sudden, we everybody there would end up needing to move to Australia or something, and they would be refugees looking for new homes, and then they would have that label stuck on them for something completely out of their control.
That's a really interesting conversation, and I'm trying to chase it. Just like bring it to the climate space because I'm really passionate about it. I went to a climate mobility conference last year, and it's a really cool label. It's essentially climate displacement. What's happening in the Pacific region? What's happening in our region? Well, our islands will maybe sinking in the coming years. Kiribati, Tuvalu, you name it. The interesting conversation that we got there was, how do you want to migrate? Do you want to migrate under the climate refugee, or do you want to migrate with dignity? And when they say like migrating with dignity, do we have a choice? And they're like, yes, we do have a choice. We have a choice or not to migrate under that category, under that label. They're like, we'd rather sink in here, die in the islands, than migrating without respect. And that got to me. I was like, this is exactly what I've been talking about for the past 10 years. We should be able to, change the narrative. And people in the Pacific, and I got 2 interviews on Voice of Aroha, if you want to, for the listeners want to go and check them out. That's specifically from 2 Pacific leaders saying that we want to migrate with dignity. We do not accept international community putting these labels, these new frameworks. Let's change it. And that's a critical view from our Pacific neighbors. They're like, hey, we have the system that is not working for us.
It's interesting that they say like they want to stay with dignity. I'm curious, what about that label like practically gives them a lack of dignity? Is there stuff that happens? Is it the treatment? Is it the way that you're spoken to? I guess treatment is like the biggest category to place it under.
Yeah, well, it's a negative stigma that you have around it, and they're like, well, we have seen how people feel about the world and the way that you are being treated because of the way that you moved around, because of migration displacement. Based on that, they're like, we don't want to do that. They have time, and the thing that they do have is a choice. And they're like, hey, now, before it happens, let's talk about those terms and conditions under which we may move to other countries.
One question: who decides that though? I know they don't want to, but I feel if somebody comes to New Zealand, the New Zealand government kind of decides what label they give them, right? For example, where does that play a role in it?
I think, yeah, I think it's up to, the rules, the policies that you have in place, the migration policies, and currently we don't have any, climate visas, if you wanna name it. So essentially, it's up to the policymakers to define like what channel they use to move here.
I was just going to ask Louis, where did your passion for climate change come from?
Through politics. I did my bachelor's in politics. But just because I went to a political camp back in 2019, my last year at uni, and essentially it was like a 3 days, full immersion and going away of Wellington. So we went to Otaki. It's called the Otaki Summer Camp. And we were like 250 campers. And at the end, the last day, they put out like a bag, and they were like, during just 3 days, this is the amount of rubbish that we produce. And we hold a lot of community events, and I've seen the amount of rubbish that we produce. Like, we have fun, everyone's just like, yeah, the food is amazing, and the performances, and you enjoy different cultures. But when it comes to waste management and rubbish, then we produce a lot. So it got to my head, is like, it is possible to, have those sort of like, correros and huis, and be eco-friendly in the way. So my passion kind of like started there.
Kodrean did mention, and clearly your passion shows, about talking to you about climate change and uh, refugee and migrant inputs into it. We spoke a little bit about the visa side of things and the migratory route side of things. What about the sort of fixing it, things we can do to improve? What kind of work are you doing with there? What kind of correros have you had with people in that space?
So we started the conversation around climate last year, and initially we just wanted to find out what was the input of ethnic communities in the conversation. And let's be clear and frank here, that the climate change framework is a pretty Western framework. Yeah. So it doesn't have a second lens to be like, oh, we should be addressing, this systematic problem in this way. No, it's only one lens. When it comes to our region, our Wellington region, so we have, different councils. And I just went across reading their policies, reading what they're trying to do regarding climate change. And then when I was reading all of those policies and those aspirations to get to net zero by 2030, I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. But when I was reading the inputs, I miss out ethnic communities. I was like, but hang on a minute, where's actually the input of the communities? And then I went to Kodrean. I was like, Kodrean, we actually don't have the inputs of the ethnic communities. And at the time, we were having conversation with the Benicia ethnic communities, saying, well, if Wellington is becoming multicultural and 35% of the population in Wellington are ethnic communities, then we are missing those voices. And we need to have a conversation with them. We need to find out what they think about climate and how they want to, address it, and what they can do within their own bubbles. So we started having those conversations, and those conversations led us to our community climate training program this year, which essentially is finding solutions, local solutions from ethnic communities, addressing addressing climate change specifically to reduce emissions in the wider Wellington region.
Do you have any? Could you give me any like examples of these things, if you know what I mean? Like any examples of what different inputs you've heard, in terms of which you wouldn't have seen otherwise. In terms of, like you said, it's more of a Western single lens framework. So any other inputs that you've seen, heard, so you could voice them.
Yeah, cool. So essentially, our climate training starts with a lot of education. So it's kind of like climate change 101. What is it? What's the science behind it? And then we bring the Wellington City Council saying, well, those are the gaps in the system. This is like, the chart or the pie of where our emissions are coming from. It could be through transport, waste, landfills, and the other little ones. Agriculture is one of the main components in Wellington. So we walked in through that sort of like education, what it is, what is the science, where the emissions are coming from, where the gaps are, to a design thinking process. And a design thinking process is, how do you want to address it? What areas you want to focus on? Because we don't have time. We have limited energy, limited resources. Where do you want to contribute to? After the design thinking, we go through the prototyping, or just kind of like designing the idea, designing the project. And from there, we get into pitch. It's kind of like a startup sort of thing, but for communities. And one of the cool things that I heard from a community member was, he said, like in the final week, 5 weeks ago, I didn't have any idea about this. Today, I'm walking away with an idea, with a business model that I want to develop. And I met him last week because I'm coaching him, because he's presenting next month. He's pitching, and he's like very passionate about this. This could work. And I'm like, wow, a person that was from zero to actually to the point where he's working on his own business idea, addressing climate for businesses in Wellington. I was like, man, those sort of opportunities are not there for us. And as Kodrean said, when he was trying to talk about Hamid and how he's a sound engineer, and how through VOA, Voice of Aroha, he's now, fulfilling his dream of being a sound engineer. That's essentially for us. We are creating the platform for, ethnic communities, small minority groups, to be part of this conversation, because it's fundamental that they are part of it. And we are so glad that, our council, the Wellington City Council, is listening to us, and they are actually giving us the resources for us to be, pushing the narrative.
I've got a question.
Go on.
For those that are wanting to get involved with Voice of Aroha, how would they go about that?
So at the beginning of the year, so every year, essentially at the end of the year, we call out for volunteers. So we're run based on volunteers. So the majority of the work that we do, podcasts, covering different episodes, going out there in the community and covering community events, they're run through our volunteers. So anyone that is interested to join us, they can, say, get in touch, because we have a form, and we also put a poster out there just calling for volunteers. So if anyone is, willing to, be part of the funnel, part of the community, they can get in touch with us. And we are always looking for, editors, people that can take cool photos, storytellers, people that could help us with the design. That's essentially how people can be part of us.
And is it limited to people living in Wellington?
For most of what we do, yes. Just because, when we're covering events and community events, we want people to come along with us. But if you want to volunteer for us, there'll be an advisor, an editor, storyteller, that you can do it online or remotely. But we're just Wellington based.
Nice.
Awesome. In that case, because yeah, we're coming close to wrap up. The one question which I ask all my guests at the end is, if you had one piece of advice for our listeners, what would it be?
Gosh,
think
that's a
I'm
good
gonna-
question.
I'm going to recycle one that I did like 2 weeks ago. Hopefully, he's not listening to this one. The piece of advice that I gave and that I'm going to recycle today is to do a shoulder check. Shoulder check, how does it work? Well, I recently got into running, and I think it's a really cool sport. And you can be a really fast runner. But when you work in the community, running and finishing the race, it's not a goal. And what I said to everyone is to do a shoulder check and just making sure that everyone is running along. And when you're a runner, you know that there's people that run slower, there are people that actually take breaks. And it's not about the race, it's about winning the marathon. And winning the marathon is bringing everyone along as well. So when you're running, community event, leading a community, shoulder check, and just making sure that your whānau, your community, your tamariki are coming along as well.
That's
Nice.
awesome. I really like that.
That's very wholesome. My bits of advice are never that wholesome. My bit of advice, again, coming from the perspective of being passionate and having a podcast trying to break down racism, is do not center yourself, listen to other people, and don't take things personally. And the reason why I say that is, again, if I reiterate the whole point of me, racism, and I, is to have those uncomfortable conversations about racism. I think one of the reasons why racism topic can be uncomfortable is because people center themselves in the discussion, and that's what makes people defensive. It's what makes people dismiss those with lived experience, and they end up taking it personally when it really has nothing to do with them. It's just a matter of trying to have a discussion and help you understand someone else's perspective. So don't center yourself, listen to other people, and don't take things personally.
Stuff.
Awesome. But but listen to other people, listen to Thoraya's podcast and mine.
Listen
Are
to
you
it with
guys-
a critical viewpoint.
Are you guys on Spotify and other channels?
Yeah, we're on Spotify, Apple, and I think even like Amazon. I just
Yep.
clicked yes to everything.
Yep. So, yep. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. We have our own website as well, smoothbrainsociety.com. So all the stuff's up on there as well. And you can also, the podcasts are also up on Substack and on Patreon. So people can also go and listen to them there. You can find them literally everywhere and on YouTube.
Nice.
So yeah, we made sure that people have access to it no matter what, because the entire point of my podcast is that everybody should have access to information, and therefore we try to not hide anything behind paywalls and as much
That's
opportunity
very
as
rare
possible to
for a
get them around.
PhD graduate.
Very rare, yeah. I'm the one and only, I think, at this
Yeah,
point.
the one and only that's
Nah.
like, here, have all my work.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I need to do an episode on my actual work. I haven't done one yet. Then everybody will have my work. But yeah, until then, that one's gate kept. But awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Lewis. Thanks, Thoraya. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I don't know. Do you say Happy World Refugee Day? I don't think I don't think it's a thing to be like. It should be celebrated every day. So,
Happy.
as Kodrean said, and happy does not sound right. But yeah, it is World Refugee Day. When this uploads, I don't know when people will listen to it, because of course it stays up online for God knows how long, forever. But yeah, take care, people. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Thanks,
for having
guys.
us. See ya.
Kara, kakite.